The missing piece for the feminist movement is the hard sense on the quality of women that makes them different and inspires those just a little bit outside. I'll do a few responses before I move on to my extension. The first is, the definition of genius used to be intellectual alone, but the definition of this expands in a way in which women can find their meaning in these roles. That's why even if it has this religious origins, the way in which it evolves and it's repurposed now is going to be different. The second, the standard of being a genius, as Kuya Joseph said, celebrates excellence and success. This inherently is good and inspirational because if the definition can be applied case to case regardless of the differences that because the definition can be applied case to case regardless of the differences that individual women have. The third is, there are multiple kinds of intelligence that exist: emotional, intellectual, social, spiritual, etc. This allows the definition to expand and be applied to exactly challenge the norms that exist in status quo, which will be important in my extension later. Because absent the embrace, more toxic and radical standards proliferate. The things defined by the patriarchy and conservative right, meaning things get worse than opposition. And lastly, other narratives and beliefs exist in status quo. Men are kind of empowered already. This debate is about how the feminist movement should be empowered in the way that they are looking at it right now. Because in the moment of status quo, there's a lot of bastardization that's happening. Absent this specialized characteristic, you're still going to see a lot of the patriarchal standards being put into women, even those, especially for those who are going to be outside of the movement that might not have, any sort of comfortability within this particular thing. First extension then. Backlash and dissent is what's going to lead to discourse, and the reason that this is going to be important is because this is the mechanism that unlocks a lot of the repurposing that we have right now. Why is this so incredibly important? Because the feminist movement as it stands is struggling in terms of how to be able to get, for example, the moderates who are kind of leaning right, for example, or the people who have doubts within that particular movement because of how, the perception of wanting to have this particular characteristics of the feminine genius is being perceived in that role. The consistency of this concept, as what Kuya Sef mentioned, complements the other efforts of the movement. Now then, firstly, this is also explained in the sense of how radicals are going to be weeded out as far as we know. And when it comes to people who are very exclusionary within the movement, we make them sure that there's going to be some discourse to ensure that the discussion is going to be symmetricized in terms of how to make the movement more homogeneous in terms of making it solid. The second, the concept of the genius appeals also to a lot of cultural division between these roles. I do not like gender roles, but in the sense that how it affects right now and how it is used outside, for example, men being more powerful, for example, women having the capacity to also say these are the things that make them unique, but also make them be able to do other things outside of those roles is what's going to be more powerful. How does this lessen the impact of the right-wing rhetoric, right? Three things. First, the feminist movement obviously will still fight for independence, substantial policy changes, etc. But embracing the feminine genius is what co-opts these from the moderates. The second, the embrace is likely to lead to rhetorics that makes them think maternity, something not to be ashamed of, empathy being more pronounced in women, and even in their roles in spiritual institutions. The third, this ensures that moderates who might be leaning trad-wise find themselves not hesitating to support the movement because they have a place there. The impact is simple. You put emphasis on capacities that are unique to the feminine genius, that a better society can be had no matter our differences. This is what extends to the most amount of impact to the neutral observers that we have on this debate. The second extension deals with that there is more gravitation to challenge the patriarchal norms. I think this is largely what LO stands for in terms of the interest of the feminist movement, to be able to have this intersectionality, have the diversity, and give women agency, for example. Why the feminine genius is not analogous to gender roles? Three things. First, embracing the feminine genius does not mean making it the center of your movement. Embracing it as a concept means that you accept this portion of it, meaning that you make these people who are already part of this bubble be able to embrace that particular characteristic and still be accepted within this movement, even if you push for it, right? The second, we inherently want a more homogeneous and solid movement. That's why even if in the instance it is embraced, it does not mean that it's likely to lead to for example, captivating or conceding to a lot of the right-wing rhetoric, for example. And the third, we're not living in the 20th century anymore. Rhetorics for gender roles exist outside of the movement as well. Cooptation is the main mechanism that we have here to be able to repurpose these things so that we have the reach to the most amount of audiences to be able to achieve the goal of intersectionality in the first place. I'll take a point. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
I've already told you that your impact is still contingent on your side. But why is your impact is only exclusive on your side? And you have not proven that at the end of it.
Because it's the way at which you unlock like one of the most unexplored areas when it comes to like the feminist movement, because if you continue the way or the pace at which we're going right now, we're not guaranteed to have a lot of result in terms of pulling those who are already with like outside of the movement. This is something that we clearly explained, right? So how do they embrace equity and equality through what makes them special, and how are they able to extend to this particular movement? 3 things. So yes, it came from the church, but once again, you can repurpose such rhetoric. So you open the discussion, and that's going to be great. Second, effectively, the embrace does not mean isolation. They're still pushed to do things like establishing this is where the best at, and this is something that we can use to be able to push for narratives that also strengthens and empowers us, for example. And the third, as a movement, you're going to likely to have more homogeneity. So this completely flips their idea on the gender categories. Why? Because as a movement now, you're able to position yourself in the sense that you capture a lot of the similar characteristics on what makes a feminine genius across different fields, right? So this is when it comes to empathy, this is when it comes to motherhood, and this also applies to other forms of intelligence, like we explained earlier, in terms of those people who are going to be excelling in those fields. The reason that this is exclusive is because because opposition needs to prove that a lot of their impacts are still going to happen, even in the instance that still happens in the problem that they want to solve right now, propose.